Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is the Steve Jones Show on this Wednesday. Matt Catrillo here with you. Steve will soon be there in the Sunbury Motors studio. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 and Hummel's Wharf. And online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai. Great selection of new and pre-owned inventory. A sales staff that is there to save you money. Simple as that. And a service department that is there with many awesome technicians ready to serve you with the diagnostics, the inspections, all the routine maintenance. It's all part of the Sunbury Motors guarantee. And more of those awesome technicians are being sought right now. So if you're interested, you're looking for your first job, looking for a career change, or you got some experience, SMC would love to hear from you. Stop by in person, apply online at sunburymotors.com, or call Todd at 286-7746. All at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. And online at sunburymotors.com. Quick programming note for tomorrow before we get into today. Penn State men's hoops against Quinnipiac is now moved up to a 4:30 tip. 4 p.m. start time because of the weather coming tomorrow. So 4:30 tip, 4 p.m. start time. And we'll have it for you here on WKOK, so just to pass that one along, I'm sure Steve will get into that too once he joins us from the Sunbury Motors studio. Today is National Signing Day. We'll certainly get into that. We'll hear from James Franklin and Reading Eagles' Rich Garcelle a little bit later, and Steve will have highlights of that. He emceed the event today for those that watched. But today is also about a legend that is gone far too soon, especially since he was in the midst of a big week and had a big weekend ahead of him. And that is Franco Harris, who passed away overnight at the age of 72. His son Doc told Associated Press no cause of the death has been given. But when you talk about just the timing of all this, it is as gut-wrenching as you can get. I mean, considering the Immaculate Reception and all the celebrations for that this week and this weekend. And, I mean, he was just celebrating it in the Heinz Museum yesterday, if I remember correctly, in Pittsburgh. And, of course, today would have been the 96th birthday of Joe Paterno, who he played for before he began his illustrious NFL career. 9-time Pro Bowler, 4-time Super Bowl champion with the Steelers. That really began at that moment in that win against the Raiders. Ran for over 12,000 yards and just meant everything to that Steelers organization. And it was time at Penn State, and even after the fact for both Penn State and for the Steelers, for everything he's done for the Special Olympics as well. I mean, you talk about a guy that is leaving a lot of a legacy both on and off the field. That is Franco Harris. And it's just such a shame that he will not be there to celebrate. But it's still a remarkable life to celebrate, and we're going to do that today. In just a couple of minutes, Jay Paterno is going to join us for his remembrance of Franco, of course, close relationship with him. And we got Neal Smith, Steve, from Selinsgrove, who played for Penn State with Franco in the 70s. So we'll get to that today, too.
Well, believe me, Jack and I have talked about Neal many times because I think, if I recall, we're going to just go James Franklin. Rich Scarcell will be tomorrow. Okay. Just so you know.
Okay.
There's a good reason for that.
No question.
Okay. There's a good reason Rich will be tomorrow.
Yes.
Which we can get to quickly, but we'll do that a little bit later as to why. Because, just very quickly, it's the wild swings of the pendulum of emotion on a day like today. I get into the Lash building, I don't know, about 10 after 6 in the morning, and then Chris Peterson comes up to me. He says, did you hear about Franco? I said, no. She says, there are reports in Pittsburgh. He says, it's not, it hadn't been confirmed yet. Remember, this is 10 after 6 in the morning. Hasn't been confirmed yet, but he may have passed away last night. I said, what? Because Franco was just here 2 weeks ago.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Oh, no, he was going to buy a basketball suite. He was at the basketball game. He was going to buy a suite. He was here with Anthony Lebrano, the whole thing. Lebrano stopped by the booth. It was like, holy Mary, mother. You got to be kidding me. Right? And then finally it got to the point where it did become confirmed. You're talking about a great Penn Stater. He and Lydell Mitchell together in the backfield. Lydell was the star. But then Franco got to the NFL, and Lydell was a heck of a player in his own right in the NFL, but Franco was a Hall of Famer. Great businessman. Philanthropist. Every year, the largest fundraiser for Special Olympics is the Beaver Stadium. Finish at the 50. Every year I am seated. Every year Franco was the starter. Every year. Saw him all the time. And his loyalty, the depth of loyalty of that man, over and over. And the irony and the way he backed Joe every step of the way. And the irony is on Joe's 96th birthday, we find out Franco's passed away. We'll talk with Jay Paterno in a moment about this and much more as we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors.
When car repairs get difficult.
Well, I just don't know. Me neither.
We get good. Sunbury Motors. More than quality new and used cars, Sunbury Motors specializes in complicated auto repair diagnosis. They can handle intricate repairs and even complete auto body with service open Monday through Friday, 7 till 4. And Sunbury Motors has made simple repairs easy. Maintaining your vehicle is necessary. Finding the time to do it is difficult. Welcome to Sunbury Motors Quick Lane. Open 7 till 4, Monday through Friday. Just walk in or call ahead. Relax in their remodeled waiting room with Wi-Fi, beverages, and snacks, while Sunbury Motors factory-trained techs take care of your oil change, tire alignments, brakes, and inspections. Quick Lane, 6:30 to 6, Monday through Friday, Saturday, 6:30 till 2. Sunbury Motors, Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury. And Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. We take the out of auto repair.
All right, welcome back. Great to have you with us. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. In the wild swing of emotions today between a signing day, which is euphoric, and the incredible depth of sadness of the loss of Franco Harris, we bring in Jay Paterno. Jay, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it so much.
Thanks, and obviously wish we were talking under a lot of different circumstances.
Yeah, no question. The irony is it's the passing of what would have been the 96th birthday of your dad as we speak about this, which has not been lost on us, okay?
My dad will worry about my birthday.
Yeah, believe me. I can hear him now.
Stop talking about my birthday. Doesn't matter.
I can hear loud and clear. I want to get to the last few years. What did Franco's depth of loyalty mean to you and to the family?
Oh, it was everything. I mean, you find out in life very quickly when things go south, and you go through some difficulty, especially when it involves something as public as what we went through. You find out very quickly who was loyal and who never was. And Franco Harris never hesitated, never needed clarification of what something meant or whatever it was. He knew the integrity of Joe and knew the integrity of Sue, and immediately put a stake in the ground and said, this is not right. Joe Paterno was a great man. And his loyalty was just massive at a time when a lot of us, in our family were looking for anybody to take a stand, and he did not hesitate at all. But that's not surprising given the character of the man that he was.
Absolutely. And not only that, the great philanthropist. I was explaining earlier that every year, when we were allowed to have it, the run to the 50, because that's the largest fundraiser for Special Olympics, and he was always there to be the starter every year.
Yep.
And he took the time to be there. What did that mean to your mom, that when it came time to do something that she needed was special, that he was always there?
Well, I think the thing, not only was he the starter, but he was there to the last person across the finish line.
That's right.
I mean, this is not a guy who just wrote checks and said, okay, great. This was a guy who put his hand in the dirt, so to speak, to really try and create the kind of change in the world that he wanted to see. And he did it with charities in Pittsburgh, and he and Dana were involved the last year and a half, 2 years with my mom in trying to do something with the Lion Pantry at Penn State and help current students at Penn State deal with food insecurity. So it is something that he has given of himself. And, the thing about it is athletes, if they're lucky, they get one moment to have a chance to do something that helps them grasp immortality. And the Immaculate Reception was that for Franco. But what you really learn about people is what they do with that moment, and what he did with that moment was impact people the rest of his life using that platform. And to me, that's the most admirable thing about him.
No question about that. And it was over and over. And again, I'm so glad you mentioned Dana, because obviously our deepest condolences go to her. But she's been by his side every time we turn around. It wasn't just Franco, but Dana's always there.
Yeah, and usually trying to herd him on to the next thing, because Franco, I mean, he was a lot like my dad in that, he had a genuine interest when someone would approach them. He would have a genuine interest, in what their backstory was and where they came from and that kind of thing. He was a very curious person that way. We were on the Happy Valley cruise 2 years ago, and we were sitting. We had just toured Hemingway's house. And we were sitting in Sloppy Joe's, Lido Mitchell and Franco and I, and someone came over to him, and he was iconic. All these years later, came over and said, "You're Franco Harris?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm a Raiders fan. I hated you all my life, but I can't hate you anymore." And he just rolled with it, and it was just a great moment. But then Franco, well, why were you a Raiders fan, and where did you grow up? And he got all this backstory out of this guy, which was really fascinating. That he took the time to be interested in other people, and he was a selfless guy.
How old were you? 3, 4 when the Immaculate Reception took place, if that? I
was 4, so I don't remember when it happened. I don't have that memory, and I confessed this to Franco many years ago, that when I was a kid, I was a Cowboy and Roger Staubach fan. Now, he's forgiven me, thankfully. I got absolution, but that was because the Cowboys used to send us free stuff, and no other team did. So if you're 8 years old and you get a Roger Staubach jersey in the mail, who are you rooting for? At 8, you can be bought off easily. Doesn't take much, but as it's come to be, I mean, it's just the admiration for the kind of person he is, and everything you thought as high a standard as you thought he lived up to, it was even more so.
Yeah, which is absolutely true. Did you ever become a Steelers fan and root for Franco Harris, or did that Cowboy buy-off continue to keep you ingrained?
When the Cowboys fired Tom Landry, I divorced him because I'm loyal. Because what they did to Tom Landry was horrible.
Right.
And when I got married to a woman from Pittsburgh, I learned I better root for the Steelers, or else it was going to be I was going to spend many Sunday nights on the couch.
Yeah. Well, that means you're smart in that regard. That means you're smart in that. Yeah, no question. Obviously, he was so fond of your dad. When his name came up, what did your dad talk about when it came to him?
He used to talk, when I first went to, I'll take it back even further. When I first went to UVA, I worked for George Welsh, who recruited Franco. And he used to talk about, Franco and what a great basketball player he was and what a great athlete he was. Then, Joe would talk about, Franco was so smart in terms of understanding not just the front seven of a defense, but where the secondary was, and seeing the whole field, which a lot of running backs don't do. And he said when Franco got in secondary, if he got a step, he knew where it was coming. He knew where pursuit was coming from, and he was going to get in the end zone. He said he just had that sense and those smarts because he understood the game. But Joe talked about that a bunch, and really talked about the kind of person he was off the field as well. Which I think spoke volumes because Joe was not a guy, as you know, Steve, who lavished praise willy-nilly.
Right. Oh, exactly. But, it's interesting because you bring that up about knowing where everybody is. That was the saving grace play for him in the preseason, and this is a story that Jack tells me, Jack Ham. You and I both know Franco's not the greatest practice player on the planet, okay? Yep. Whether it's Penn State or the Steelers. So they're going through training camp. It's like, okay, what is the deal with this guy? Literally. And they're playing, then they play the first preseason game with, I believe it was the Atlanta Falcons. And they give him the ball, and he goes left, and it's all clogged. Boom, circles back, finds the alley, and goes, 70, 75 yards for a touchdown. Chuck Noll looked back at everybody and said, okay, we're okay there. Don't really worry about him in practice anymore.
Exactly. But I mean, he just was one of those guys that, the thing that's amazing about him is how iconic he remained all these years later. Mm-hmm. I mean, the number of times that I was with him in public, I mean, this is a guy at the time hadn't played in the NFL since the 80s, and just you look at it, you would see people walk by in the street and go, that's Franco Harris, and it's just, it's been amazing how the reaction today, just across so many sectors. I mean, he transcended the sport, and he always will.
And what's interesting in transcending the sport, because you and I had you knew him a lot better than I did, but I still knew him, was how humble he was. I mean, he gave people time. He did not run. He had no ego, and that's a part about him I always admired. He gave everybody time because he didn't have any ego. He was not one of those guys when you walked away and went, I met Franco Harris. You walked away and went, I met Franco Harris. He is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, just in his patience. I mean, it's just he was patient with everybody, and just really giving. And like I said, it just there's certain people in sports who they know who they are. They don't need the adulation, and they carry themselves with a poise and an air about them that becomes charismatic. Whether it was DiMaggio, I was fortunate to be around DiMaggio with my dad once or twice. Walter Payton, certainly, Franco Harris is in that same group where they didn't need to be adored. They showed up wherever when they showed up, I mean, people recognized them without them having to remind everybody how great they were. And, in an era where people just can't wait to go on social media and brag about everything they do, he is, he's an old school guy that way, and I think that's why he was so beloved, because he did not think he was above anybody, and he just carried himself in a way that represented the Steelers and Penn State and his family in the right way.
They were, I think, the two words I think of are poise and grace.
Yep.
I mean, the way he carried, and he ran a few steps at Beaver Stadium, just so everybody knows. Somebody,
I gotta tell you,
who told him to run to the ball?
No question, Joe. Okay, last week we were going to have him on our Nittany Game Week TV show this week, and
right.
Just by chance last Monday I said, let's get him this week because next week will be really, really busy. And so we interviewed him last week, and he talked about how, all those years of Joe yelling, go to the ball, Franco, go to the ball, Franco. And in that moment, how he had been trained to go to the ball really, really mattered. And then, I asked him about, a couple things. One was, a lot of people know with Franco, they played that game, and then it was on the 23rd, so they had Christmas Day off as a team. Mm. So he went to the airport after the game to fly home. And, we live in the era where opposing players hug each other and trade jerseys, and everybody's buddy. And Franco and Dana get to the airport, and there's only like one restaurant open. They walk in, and the entire Raiders team is in there. And they all look and see him come in, and Franco realized pretty quickly that he might want to back away slowly and not startle anybody. So one guy from the team came over and said something to him. The rest of them glared at him, and he said, I got to get out of here. Let's find something else to eat. I mean, it's just those little things like that are, it's just neat. And I think one of the great things when I asked him last week, I said, why do you think that play is still so iconic? And he said, people love stories of hope, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, as long as, people always feel as long as there is time left on the clock, there's hope. And this morning when I heard the news, I thought of that, and I said, the clock may have finally run out on him, but what he's done will endure long past that.
No question. And his loyalty over the last few years, when it came to your dad, meant a lot to all of us. So,
yep, no doubt.
Jay, thanks so much on obviously a tough day, but to you and that beautiful family that I think the world of. Merry Christmas.
Thanks. And same to you and, everybody else out there, Merry Christmas. And for Saturday night, let's go Steelers.
There you go. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate you so much.
Take care.
Jay Paterno. We will come back with more in a moment. Neal Smith next half hour as we continue on News Radio 1070 WKLK, brought to you by Sunbury Motors.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, best in new inventory, all with great warranties, great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. And a fabulous service department with great technicians to back it all up at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. There are only two players in the history of Penn State football that have 10 interceptions in a season. One is Neal Smith. Ironically, the other is Franco Harris's brother, Pete. They're the only two that have ever had 10 in a season. We're very pleased to be joined by Neal Smith, teammate of Franco Harris and Jack Ham. Neal, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so let's go back to that era of Penn State football. Franco Harris is, on the football team with Lydell Mitchell. You guys had to go against them, I think, in practice as the scout team. What was that like?
Well, I was actually 2 years older than those two. And freshmen weren't eligible at the time, so I only really played with them 1 year. But I do remember it was spring ball of my, well, I was a junior, but it was spring ball before my senior year, and it was before Franco's sophomore year. And early in the season, 20 practices, one of the assistant coaches came up to me and asked me what I thought of Franco and how hard he hit and stuff like that. And I said, geez, I haven't really experienced that too much. Well, it didn't take long before I did experience it, and I knew how good he was.
Well, that was the irony of it. The irony of it was number 34 was the fullback, but Lydell Mitchell was the star of the two in college. That was the irony of it.
Well, Franco really, their senior year, 1971.
Yeah.
Lydell had great stats that year, but the two prior years, I think Franco was right there with Lydell their junior year and with Charlie Pittman their sophomore year. You know, they were both very good running backs with similar statistics.
That's what Jack Ham and we've talked about this before. Jack said, those are the scout team guys? Because, as you said, freshmen were ineligible. Those are the scout team guys? Yeah. Really? I mean, that's the irony of it.
Yeah.
And the other part that I think almost everybody knows. Franco was not America's greatest practice player. and Joe rode him a little bit for not being the greatest practice player. Is that fair?
That's fair. I really don't remember him being that bad, but that seems to be the consensus, yes.
Yes. I have to ask you, you go back to that particular time, and I talked about your 10 interceptions, Neal. That defense, what was it like playing in the secondary with that defense and that front seven in front of you in that era?
Actually, it was 8 in front of me. We played a 4-4-3 at that time.
Yep.
And of those 8, the 4 linemen and the 4 linebackers, 3 are in the College Football Hall of Fame. And there was a couple other great ones, Steve Smear and John Ebersol, and that could well have been in that too. It was easy playing safety behind them.
Where were you when Franco had the Immaculate Reception 50 years ago?
I was probably, I think, sitting at home watching the game. Went nuts with the kids and everybody else. Well, the kids weren't old enough, I guess, at that time, 72. But my wife and I went nuts.
Now, were you a Steelers fan at that point? I mean, obviously, you're in the eastern part of the state. Were you a Steelers fan?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, you were? Okay, so here they are. So they have this miracle moment that gets them into the AFC Championship game. Were you Joe always said, go to the ball. So in the end, when you think back on it, are you surprised that Franco was the one that went to the ball and caught it?
No, not.
All right.
Not at all. It is amazing that a fullback would be in that position, though. But that's, Franco, I think, went to the ball his whole career.
What I realize you guys were in different classes, Neal, but what do you remember about, if at all, about his personality in college, the time that you were together and around him?
Pretty much what everybody's saying about him. He was very humble, always smiling, had no ego, respectful of everybody else. He was just a great person.
You saw, of course, we talked about later in life, and especially the last 10, 11 years, everyone saw how Franco stuck up for Joe Paterno's reputation. Any surprise on your part about the depth of loyalty that he showed, not his entire life, but in that moment?
Oh, not at all. I haven't seen Franco a lot, since he graduated, but it didn't surprise me at all. He's just that kind of person.
What made, because you were, the undefeated teams back to back, obviously great teams. So I have to ask you, what made that group that included him special in your mind?
I think the coaching meant a lot to all of us. Not only Paterno, but he had a great, mature staff at the time that really set a good example for us, I think.
And, of course, the back-to-back Orange Bowls along the way that were spectacular. Since I've got you here, we'll talk about a couple of guys. You were in the same field with Mike Reed.
Right.
And at the football banquet a week ago, one of the awards is the Reed Robinson Award. I talked about who Dave Robinson is, and I mentioned when it came to Mike Reed, I said, not only the Outland Trophy, there's nobody I've ever heard of in my life that had 3 safeties in one game. What was it like watching Mike Reed practice and then watching Mike Reed play?
Oh, he was so intense, especially on the field, obviously, but unbelievable intensity from him. He wrestled at Penn State also. And,
I know. He got carried off the mat after beating, I think it was Lehigh. I think he got carried off the mat because it swung the dual meet.
Yeah, I was at that match, and it came down to the heavyweight, and the poor Lehigh wrestler came out on the mat, and some of the team members had Mike behind the bleachers in rec hall, and you could hear him getting him pumped up, and he came out, and to the crowd just cheering, and it was wild. I just felt sorry for the poor Lehigh guy.
I have to ask you about my broadcast partner, Jack Ham. How early could you tell that he had a chance? Because, we knew he was the last guy. Everybody knows about the last guy in the class and so forth. How early could you tell, this guy can play? How early was that for you, Neal?
Oh, I think, let's see, he was 1 year behind me. He was actually my age, I think, but because he matured late, I believe, and didn't go to Penn State right out of high school, and like you said, was the last recruit of the following year. Steve Smear begged Paterno, I think, to take him. So not when he was a freshman as much, just playing with the freshman team, but he started to come on his sophomore year, and by the beginning of his junior season, he was dominant.
I asked you about Franco. The other part of that equation was Lydell Mitchell. What was you talked about how hard it was that, Franco would go after you and he'd throw his body into you. What was Lydell Mitchell like?
He was tough, too, but he had a little quicker. So he had quickness and toughness there.
And I don't think anybody should forget Charlie Pittman, who was older than they are.
Right.
You guys were classmates. What made him special? Because I don't think he should ever get lost in the mix here.
No, I don't either. he was just a good all-around athlete. He could do anything. He didn't get a lot of passes thrown to him because we weren't a passing team back then. But when he did, he caught him, and I had a lot of speed.
Obviously, we do get to a certain point in our life where there are the passing of people that are peers. How shocking was the news that when you found out that Franco had passed?
Unbelievable. With everything coming up this weekend, and knowing that he was in the preparation, I'm sure. I can't believe it. I can't wait to hear what it was. I'm assuming a heart attack or something similar.
Well, at some point we will find out, but it was a shock to all of us. And I want to thank you, Neal, for the time that you gave us today. Even under tough circumstances, it was a pleasure talking with you.
Yes, it is tough circumstances, and he'll be missed, that's for sure.
Neal, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Neal Smith. As I mentioned earlier in the introduction, there are two players in the history of Penn State football that have 10 interceptions in a season. Neal Smith in 1969, and ironically, Franco Harris' brother Pete Harris in 1978. And by the way, Giuseppe Harris also played here. Giuseppe Harris, by the way, had a big block punt in a game against North Carolina State that won a game. So the Harrises have all made their contributions here. All right. We talked about the wild swings of emotion on a day like this. What would have been Joe's 96th birthday? Steve, don't talk about my birthday. I can hear it now, as Jay said. The passing of Franco Harris and the shock of that. But then at the same time, the euphoria over the future of Penn State football, because today's signing day. James Franklin in the next hour. Tomorrow we'll have Rich Scarcella on the show. Thanks for being with us today. Today's show is sponsored by Lion Country Kia, by Sunbury Motors. Just about the same thing, by the way. Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummel's Wharf. Online at sunburymotors.com. The best in the business, and so proud to be here in the Sunbury Motors studio on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Dick in Milton. Hi, Dick. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Sad day for Penn State. I wanted to tell you, I started watching games at Beaver Stadium when Lydell and Franco were playing, so that's a long time ago. But what I wanted to tell you, we go to Michigan on the away trip, and you know that damn boulder and 100,000 seats, and you have to go in from the top. So we go down there, and the Penn State students were on the bottom, so we had to stand the whole game. But the thing about Franco, I looked over two sections, and there was Franco, Harris, and Lydell Mitchell, the same distance from the field as we were in the end zone. They didn't have any better seats than I got. I would have thought they'd put those guys in the press box.
What bothers me is the people in Michigan didn't know either one of them happened to be. All right,
but that's something. That's where they sat in the damn end zone for that football game when we were.
How about that? Ay.
And I really appreciate Neal Smith being on today. You know, a local guy, small school, Pennsylvania, right close to where in our conference, and it shows a guy can do anything. Doesn't matter what school you come from.
No question. And Neal's a class act too.
Nice guy, good guy.
Yep, absolutely.
But sad day for us and everybody that's Penn State or Pitt's fan on Franco.
Well said. Thank you so much, Dick.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Bye.
James Franklin's press conference on signing day and a few comments about Franco as well when we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK.